And so we come to the last part in the mass media. We're now on page 290. This is issues in researching the mass media. Okay, so we've looked at the effects, we've looked at the different models, and now we're just going to see the final bit as regards the kind of ethical issues in here and the other problems with mass media. So researching the mass media has posed particular problems for sociologists. The mass media constitutes a very large area of study, covering types of media as diverse as film, television, the press and the internet. They are also constantly changing, with new technologies such as video games or satellite television emerging all the time with a global impact. This makes the concept of mass media hard to define and even harder to measure, where hugely different audiences have to be taken into account. The very notion of a mass medium is, in any case, fundamentally challenged by theories such as postmodernism and, to a lesser extent, pluralism. In the field of media effects, the time span across which they are measured will produce different results, with long-term effects being particularly difficult to discern and verify. The method used will also yield specific types of results, with questions of validity and reliability attached. Okay, so the long-term effects, it's going to be difficult to measure them, because let's say you measure the long-term effect of listening to the radio. Now, in the 1940s, people listened to the radio all the time, but life has moved on from there. And there are so many other media that you could be looking at or listening to that the radio has diminished. So therefore, looking at it as its long-term effects, you're not going to get the same sort of results because everything has changed. So studying the media is a very difficult topic for sociologists to study, in the sense of ever being able to come up with anything concrete. Laboratory experiments may show certain effects, but they can never replicate the circumstances under which the mass media are actually consumed. A television program, for example, may be intensively watched in one household while serving as background noise in another. There has also been a reluctance to employ a range of methods simultaneously, as Gunter notes. The limitations of much of the research done so far are really to be found in the methods used. Most studies have been unidimensional, approaching the subject from one angle, employing one kind of measure and drawing conclusions which their measures do not entitle them to make. Okay, so Gunter is saying that there are problems, because what the research has done is it's kind of looked just in one way at what the mass media is saying, and what it seems to be forgetting is that there are lots and lots of different ways of interpreting this. So you actually need a level of triangulation to be able to pull everything in there. But even so, because Coronation Street is so important to my life, I come home from work, I sit down for half an hour and watch Coronation Street if I've got the time when I come in from work, and that's my way to relax, right? But for somebody else, Coronation Street may just be something that somebody else watches more in their household. So the relevance of everything has to be taken into account, and you can't do that if you put somebody into a laboratory. You need to be, watching somebody in their own home, but then of course that's intrusive, and the ethical issues that surround that are just massive. So the way that the mass media can be investigated or researched is very difficult. Even, you know how it is, if you all go and watch a film, if you go and watch it with a group of friends and then you discuss it afterwards, you can have a completely wide-ranging view of what the film was about, whether people enjoyed it, who the best actor, actress was in the film, all of those types of things. And you can't measure the response of people as and when you're there. So therefore, this is majorly difficult to be able to research. Okay, where the mass media rather than the consumer become the object of study, there has been a tendency to use the other key concepts in sociology in a limited and undefined way, when in fact they demand as careful a use as some of the terms studied in the sociology of the mass media. This includes concepts such as class or gender, which are often examined in isolation from each other, or terms like violence and deviance. The result can be the stereotypical use of complex terms. So when we actually looked at the issues of gender and age and ethnicity and disability representations, the problem is that we can't just say we're going to look at gender in the media, because everything mixes in together. And so you've got to try to avoid the sorts of stereotypical views that you're going to come up with. Equally, some issues can be approached in a narrow way, leading to the exclusion of other dimensions to the topic. The issue of television violence has been largely dominated by the possibility that it may cause or be related to violence in society, when other issues could also be looked at. These include the role of other agencies around violence, such as the willingness of witnesses to report or prevent violence, or the police to deal with it. Concentrating on an issue in one way can crowd out equally relevant concerns. And we've been saying this as we go through, that yes, it could be that somebody watched a violent video, right? But it could also be lots and lots of other factors that come into it. They may have a relative who's violent, and they've seen them using violence, and therefore they think that's the right thing to do. They may have a friend who encourages violence. In fact, that video that they watched could have been the least violent thing that they've seen. But if we blame everything on the media, we push out everything else that it's possible to consider. The extent to which media researchers remain distant from their subject of study should also be highlighted. Much of the existing research into the mass media has suffered from the lack of objectivity with which it has been studied, damaging the credibility of other research in this field. This issue, for example, is at the heart of the debate concerning television news, with both Harrison and the GUMG accusing each other of bias and a lack of objectivity, and of representing vested interests. Similarly, ethnographic methods, which may, for example, involve researchers watching television with people in their homes, can be intrusive and even voyeuristic, running the risk of alienating the group under study in the interest of generating qualitative data. There is also a problem of reflexivity in the study of the mass media, in that research into it can become a news story in itself, with mass media personnel able to influence the way the public views research into itself. Okay, so here are all our ethical issues, if you like, coming up at the end. Okay, objectivity is really difficult in here. How can you look at the news and be objective? We're all swayed by stories. We all think, it's just all bad news. Is there nothing good going on in the world? And when politics start coming into it, then objectivity gets lost. And when it's a story about a certain country and we think that that country maybe discriminates against certain people, then objectivity is lost again. And so it's always going to be an issue. If you ever get the chance to watch The Truman Show, you will see the film, you will see completely this idea of voyeurism taken to an extreme. Is that fair? And do people behave the same way when they're being watched by somebody else? Maybe they think that they need to start watching different types of programs because of the person that's there with them, and they want to put across a different image to the true one. So all of this becomes unreliable. Okay, and of course the media can then influence people into understanding research that is done upon itself. And so therefore, we just go round and round in circles trying to find the best reliable and valid way of studying the mass media.